Picture an old Western movie, a solitary cowboy resting beside a flickering campfire as the sky burns orange, lazily eating beans from a dented tin plate. It's the kind of scene everyone associates with the frontier. But the truth, that image is almost completely fabricated. What cowboys actually consumed during the long cattle drives of the 1800s was far rougher, far stranger, and sometimes downright shocking. Their meals weren't romantic. They were repetitive to the point of misery. Yet mixed into that monotony were odd, resourceful dishes that would probably make most modern stomachs churn. This isn't a tale of cozy campfire suppers. It's a story of survival, improvisation, and a diet shaped by harsh necessity. If you love digging into the real stories behind the Old West, hit that subscribe button, tap the bell, and give this video a like. You're about to hear some wild truths. Part 1. The Trail's Holy Trinity. Feeding a crew of exhausted men for months while traveling hundreds of miles from any settlement was a massive challenge. The goal wasn't flavor, it was endurance. So trail cooks relied on a dependable trio: beef, beans, and biscuits, chosen because they were easy to transport, slow to spoil, and loaded with energy. Let's start with the beef. Cowboys moved enormous herds across the plains, yet ironically, fresh meat was rare. Those cattle were the boss's livelihood. Slaughtering a healthy steer just for dinner would be like dipping into your employer's bank account. It simply wasn't allowed. So when did they get fresh beef? Only when an animal was injured, sick, gave out on the trail, or when a calf couldn't keep up. Most of the time, the beef they ate was jerky, nothing like the soft, seasoned snacks sold today. Strips of meat were heavily salted and dried rock hard in the sun. It was tough, salty, and required serious chewing, but it lasted. On the rare occasion a steer was butchered, the cook didn't waste a scrap. After frying up the chewy steaks, he'd toss flour into the leftover fat, making a thick, rich gravy called sop, or Texas butter, served over biscuits. If beef was the treat, beans were the foundation. They were the one constant: cheap, filling, and packed with protein. Pinto beans were the staple choice since they were easy to carry and kept well in the chuck wagon. Cooking beans on the trail wasn't quick or simple. It took almost an entire day. Each morning, the cook would dump a huge load of dried beans into a pot of water to soak. As the chuck wagon rattled along the trail, the constant shaking helped soften them. When the herd finally stopped for the night, that bean pot was the first thing on the fire, simmering for hours so it would be ready by sunrise. Their importance was clear from the nicknames cowboys gave them: Prairie Fuel and Whistleberries, the latter poking fun at their famous stomach-rumbling effects. The third essential food of the trail was bread, and nothing was more beloved than a well-made sourdough biscuit. A talented cook took great pride in mastering them. His secret weapon was the sourdough starter, a living yeast culture he treated like a treasured pet. The crock holding it had to be fed every day, and on freezing nights the cook even slept with it to keep the yeast alive. On the opposite end was hardtack, the toughest trail food of them all: just flour, water, and salt baked into a brick-like slab. It almost never spoiled, but it was so solid that cowboys nicknamed it gunwaddin. Most had to dunk it in coffee before they could even bite into it. Part 2. The Monarch of the Campfire. That popular image of the lone cowboy fending for himself is pure Hollywood. In reality, a cattle drive was a tightly run operation with clearly defined roles. At the heart of it all stood the chuck wagon, an invention by Charles Goodnight in 1866 that transformed long drives forever. Originally a military wagon, it was refitted into a rolling kitchen, pantry, supply depot, and even carried all the riders' bedding and repair tools. And ruling over that wagon was the most respected and sometimes most feared man on the trail: the cook, universally known as Cookie. Second in authority only to the trail boss, Cookie often earned more money than the best riders. Good food meant good spirits, and experienced cowboys would turn down a drive if they knew the cooking was terrible. Cookie's routine was exhausting. He rose around 3 in the morning to grind coffee beans and spark the fire, often using dried cow patties for fuel. Before dawn broke, breakfast was on the table. Once the crew rode out, he scrubbed every pan and plate, loaded up the entire wagon, and drove his mule team ahead of the herd to set up the next camp and start dinner. He played far more roles than just chef. He was also the trail medic, dentist, barber, and occasionally the man who safeguarded everyone's money. Most importantly, he served as the navigator. Each night he pointed the wagon tongue toward the North Star, giving the trail boss his direction for the following day. The space around the chuck wagon was considered the cook's personal domain, and it operated under its own strict set of rules. Anyone who violated them risked a fierce tongue lashing. One of the biggest offenses was riding a horse close enough to the wagon to kick dust into the food, and no cowboy touched a plate until the cook announced it, usually by bellowing, "Come and get it." Mealtime was strictly business. Grab your food, step away from the fire, keep quiet, and, above all, never leave leftovers. Wasting food was one of the worst insults you could give Cookie. Even the coffee pot had its own ritual. If a man went to pour himself a cup and someone called out, "Man at the pot," he was required to pour a cup for everyone else who wanted one. Part 3. Foods You'd Never Expect Cowboys to Eat. The real personality of cowboy cooking didn't lie in the basics, but in the strange, ingenious dishes created out of necessity. Their guiding principle was simple: nothing goes to waste. This mindset led to some of the most unconventional meals on the frontier. At the very top of this resourceful cuisine was a legendary dish with an equally legendary name, son of a gun stew. This was the ultimate use-everything meal, usually made when a newborn calf was too frail to continue on the trail. As one old cowhand put it, the cook would throw everything into the pot except the hide, horns, and holler. The stew included tender cuts, but also the calf's heart, tongue, liver, kidneys, and the ingredients that made it infamous: the brains, which worked as a natural thickener, and the marrow gut. A milk-filled tube between the stomachs that only tasted right while the calf was still nursing. That rich, creamy flavor made the dish a cowboy favorite. This no-waste philosophy showed up again during roundup season. The leftovers from castration didn't go into the trash. They went into the frying pan, known as campfire fries or Rocky Mountain oysters. These were seasoned, dusted in cornmeal, and fried crisp. Cowboys considered them a real treat, often describing the taste as nutty with a hint of game. When provisions got scarce, cowboys turned to the wild. They hunted deer, rabbits, and wild turkeys whenever possible. But their definition of game could stretch quite far. They sometimes ate snakes and even skunks. Frontier manuals even offered instructions for cooking skunk, with one crucial warning: remove the scent glands very carefully. Cowboys also gathered wild plants to add variety to their meals. One of the most creative results was sheep sorrel pie, made from a wild herb with a tangy lemon-like bite. It served as a stand-in for citrus, producing a surprisingly sweet and sour frontier dessert. Part 4. Cowboy Coffee and Life on the Trail. What cowboys drank mattered just as much as the food they ate. Aside from his horse, a cowboy's most constant companion was coffee, not as a treat, but as a necessity. A steaming cup of strong, black brew helped him shake off sleep for an early morning watch and offered warmth on cold prairie nights. The cook typically boiled water, tossed in a hefty scoop of grounds for each cup, and let it steep. The result was notoriously intense, earning the nickname Cree, six-shooter coffee, based on the tall tale that it was strong enough to hold up a revolver. A major improvement in trail coffee came with Arbuckle's Ariosa coffee. Before its introduction, trail cooks had to roast raw green coffee beans over an open fire, a tricky and time-consuming task. The Arbuckle brothers developed a method of coating pre-roasted beans with a sugary glaze, preserving the aroma and preventing spoilage. It quickly became the go-to coffee for cattle drives and changed cowboy mornings forever. Whiskey was the other essential drink. Though rarely consumed for pleasure on the trail, it was kept for medical use and was the standard remedy for everything from colds to snake bites. Despite a calorie-heavy diet, cowboys suffered from dangerous vitamin deficiencies, especially vitamins A and C. Months without fresh produce put them at serious risk. The most feared consequence was scurvy, a crippling condition brought on by the absence of vitamin C. To fight it, cowboys relied heavily on canned tomatoes, one of the few sources of nutrients available on the open range. Disease, more than guns or stampedes, was the deadliest threat on the trail. Poor sanitation led to cholera and dysentery, and constant fatigue caused frequent accidents. Combined with a limited diet and minimal medical care, life on the trail was far harsher than the romantic image often shown in films. The popular picture of a cowboy eating peacefully by a campfire fades once you understand the reality. Their meals were shaped by necessity, danger, and relentless hardship. Fresh beef was uncommon, beans required a full day to prepare, and bread ranged from fluffy sourdough to jaw-breaking hardtack. Their most astonishing foods came from a refusal to waste a single part of any animal. Whether it was running son-of-a-gun stew, made from nearly an entire calf, or darum, calf fries, considered a real delicacy, cowboys embraced a complete nose-to-tail way of eating born purely from survival. All of this unfolded under the authority of the camp cook, whose strict rules and central role reveal that cattle drives were tightly organized communities, not bands of solitary wanderers. The story of cowboy food is the story of their endurance, a daily contest of grit, determination, and creativity. It's a reality far more compelling than any Hollywood fantasy. If you enjoyed this deeper dive into the real Old West, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more true historical stories. Now tell us, which cowboy food surprised you the most? Drop your answer in the comments below.